Okay. Welcome, everyone. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you're joining us from today. My name's Kate, and I'm part of our international recruitment team here at Western. I'm also joined by my colleague Tomi, who will be helping answer questions in the Q&A today. And I'm pleased to introduce our presenter for today, my colleague Fabiana, who's part of our International and Exchange Student Center, known as IESC. The IESC is a hub that you'll come to know very well on campus for our international students. They help with everything from study permits, which this session covers today, to questions about working in Canada, hosting events every year, running our peer guide program, and lots of different ways to connect our students with one another. This session today is going to provide an overview of the study permit process, specifically for students who are in Canada. We did host a session last week for students studying outside Canada, and the recording is available on our website if that's helpful for you. I want to remind you that you can find the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and you're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll be answering some questions as we go along, but we'll also save some questions to answer live at the end that may be helpful for the whole group to hear. I also want to remind you that when you're asking questions, try to keep them a bit more general in nature. We know that when it comes to study permits, you might have a very specific case and questions about your situation, but we want to make sure that you're not revealing too much personal information within the Q&A so that others aren't seeing that. But don't worry, if you do have specific questions about your case, we're going to provide you with ways that you can connect with us after today to get the advice that you need for that study permit process. Before we get into the presentation, if we switch to the next slide, I just want to start off with a land acknowledgement. So while you may be joining us from elsewhere in Canada or in the world, we are joining you today from London, Ontario. Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Chinantun nations. We're grateful to be able to live, work, and play on these lands. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenter for today, Fabiana, who's going to take you through the wonderful process and all of the steps that you need to know for your study permit.
Great. Thank you, Kate. As Kate mentioned, my name is Fabiana Tepedino, and I'm the Programs Coordinator and an International Student Advisor at Western International. For today's session, we're going to talk about how to apply for your study permit from inside of Canada, what the PAL requirements and exemptions are, how to change your DLI from inside Canada if you're joining from another post-secondary institution, and your responsibilities as a study permit holder. So on our team, we have a group of 5 RCICs and RECIAs on staff. We are all listed on the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants website, and we're here to support you through your study permit application process. Our advisors can help even before you arrive for free. We can provide advice on your study permit application, although we won't prepare your application for you. If you have specific questions about how to apply for your study permit extension, we can help you along the way. And we're also here to help you throughout your time at Western with your immigration questions, as well as just adjusting to Canada and other questions you may have as an international student. So to get us started, our focus today will be on applying for your study permit from inside of Canada. So the session is for students who are currently in Canada, whether you're here on a study permit or a temporary resident permit, or you're here with family. It's for those of you that are currently here in Canada. It's important that you apply for your study permit as soon as you receive your acceptance letter, but no more than 6 months before your current study permit expires. If you apply for your study permit before it expires, you can continue to study under the same terms and conditions of your current study permit until IRCC makes a decision. This only applies as long as you stay in Canada, and it's what they call maintaining your status in Canada. So as long as you don't leave Canada, you can continue to study under the same terms and conditions of your previous study permit. If you're in Canada right now with a status other than a study permit, it's Important for you to know that you must wait to receive your study permit before you can start your studies at Western. You must have a valid study permit in order to start those studies. And this includes those who might be here as a protected person in Canada. You do still require to apply for a study permit. So who can apply in Canada for a study permit? So if you're currently in Canada and you have a valid study or work permit, if your spouse, common law partner, or parent has a valid study or work permit, if you're a minor child in primary or secondary school, if you're an exchange student or visiting student, if you completed a short-term course or study program required to be accepted at a DLI, such as an ESL program, if you or your spouse, common law partner, or dependent child has a temporary resident permit valid for 6 months or more, if you're a Ukrainian national or family member of a Ukrainian national, if you are being sponsored to immigrate and you already applied for permanent residence, if you or your spouse, common law partner, or dependent child are subject to an unforeseeable removal order, or if you're the spouse, common law partner, or dependent child of an athlete on a team based in Canada, a member of the media, a member of the clergy, military personnel on duty in Canada, or an accredited foreign representative, or if you're a refugee claimant in Canada or a family member of a refugee claimant in Canada. So if your current status, if you're currently in Canada and you fit under one of those categories, then you can apply for your study permit from within Canada. Otherwise, you will have to apply for your study permit from outside of Canada. There were some recent announcements this year that apply to study permit applications. So as of January 22nd, some new study permit applications, except those who are exempt, are required to include a provincial attestation letter, otherwise known as a PAL. Without the PAL, study permit applications may be returned with a full refund to the student. However, we'll get into the exemptions, which most of you should hopefully qualify under. The other big change to study permit applications is that international students now need to demonstrate a minimum of $20,635 plus your first year of tuition and your travel costs as proof for financial support in your study permit application. And moving forward, these financial requirements will be increased and adjusted annually. So who needs a PAL and are you exempt? So generally speaking, as I mentioned, new study permit applications will require a PAL. However, if you are currently in Canada and one of the following situations applies to you, you are exempt from the PAL requirement. So you do not need a PAL. So if you're in Canada and you have a valid study permit and are applying for a study permit extension, if you have a work permit, if you are a temporary resident who is visiting or who is a visiting or an exchange student studying at a DLI, if you're a temporary resident who has completed a course or program that is a prerequisite to you enrolling at a DLI, if you're under a removal order but can't be removed from Canada at this time, if you have a temporary resident permit valid for at least 6 months, and if you're a protected person. Additionally, if you are the family member of somebody who lives in Canada and is one of the following, so if your family member is a study permit holder, work permit holder, temporary resident permit holder that's valid for at least 6 months, member of the armed forces, accredited foreign government representative, a participant in certain sports activities or events, a worker in Canada who is a member of the foreign news company, a religious worker, a protected person, somebody who is eligible for permanent residence based on humanitarian and compassionate grounds, or under a current public policy, or as a spouse or common law partner through the common law partner in Canada class. So if you fall under any of these categories, you are exempt from the PAL requirements. So again, you do have to be in Canada when you apply for your study permit in order to be exempt from the PAL. So for those of you who are currently here, and starting at Western in September, you are strongly encouraged and advised to apply for your study permit within Canada, as you won't be eligible, you may not be eligible for a PAL. So to apply for a study permit from inside of Canada, as I mentioned, the recommendation is to apply at least 30 days before your current study permit or your current status expires. So make sure to check your passport. It must be valid when you apply. And it's always important to keep note of that passport validity. To apply for your study permit, you will apply online. And you will, once you apply online, you'll wait to receive your approval letter in your account, or they may ask you for additional documents, or hopefully not, you may receive a rejection or a refusal letter. Once you get that approval letter, you will wait for your study permit to be mailed to you here in Canada. As I mentioned earlier, if you are currently here on a study permit and you apply for the study permit extension, you would have what's called the maintained status, which means that you're authorized to remain in Canada under the same terms and conditions as your previous status until you get a decision from immigration. You will lose that maintained status if you decide to leave Canada while that application is in process. So how do you apply to extend your study permit or to apply for a study permit from inside of Canada? So whether you're extending your current study permit or you're changing your status from either a work permit or a visitor status to a study permit while in Canada, the first step is that you will sign in or create an account on the IRCC Secure Account portal. You can access a link from the IRCC main website. There's a link that says sign in or create an IRCC secure account. With this account, you would sign in with either a GC key or a sign-in partner with your Canadian bank account information. Please note that the site to apply for a new study permit from outside of Canada is a different portal. So it's important that you use the correct portal to apply for your study permit from within Canada. Step 2 is determining your eligibility. So once you sign into your account, you will click where it says apply to come to Canada, and then you will select the visitor visa, study, and or work permit button. This will take you to a questionnaire where you will answer a set of questions where you will select your reason to come to Canada, which is to study for more than 6 months, your country of citizenship, and your country of residence. It's important that you put Canada if you're applying from within Canada. So you will go through the questionnaire. You will get to a section where it asks about the provincial attestation letter. So it will ask, do you have a provincial attestation letter? So if you don't have one, you will say no. Do you qualify for an exemption? So if you fit within any of the categories discussed in one of the previous slides, you will say yes. And any of those categories would be the third option. So in the third question, what exemption do you qualify for? Generally, you would fall under the I'm an applicant applying from within Canada as described under section 2151 of the Immigration and Refugee Protection regulations. You will continue answering the questions, and eventually you should get to a screen that gives you the option of applying for your study permit within Canada or a temporary resident visa. So it's important that you will select the study permit in Canada. When you're applying for a study permit in Canada, if you do need a temporary resident visa to enter Canada later on, that is a second application once you receive your new study permit. So you will start with the study permit in Canada application. So once you, after that step, there will be some more questions, but eventually you will get to this page, a page that looks like this, which is your document checklist that's personalized based on the answers you provided in the previous screens. So this is where you will download the application form, as well as where you will upload all of the documents that you need to include with your application. So that includes a copy of your passport, your acceptance letter, proof of support, financial support, digital photo. Under the optional documents, the Schedule 1 is not a requirement. This is for students who are applying from outside of Canada. And under client information is where you can add any additional documents or explanation letters that you would like to attach with your application that don't fit any of the prior categories. So to apply for your study permit, you will need to fill out the application to change conditions, extend my stay, or remain in Canada as a student, which is form IMM 5709. You will need to scan all the pages of your passports, including any pages with any visas, stamps, or signatures on it. You will also need your acceptance letter for Western. And if you are eventually extending it, you might need a study permit extension letter from Western. Or if you are currently a student somewhere else, you might want to show your current student status, a letter from the institution you're currently attending. In addition to that, you'll need to provide your proof of financial support. So as I mentioned earlier, immigration would like to see that you have a minimum of $20,635 for the year to cover your living expenses plus your tuition for 1 year. So the types of documents you can include to show your proof of financial support include your bank statements for the last 3 or 4 months, your study permit extension letter, a statement of account from your student center account if you've paid your tuition. If you haven't paid your tuition, that's okay. You just need to show that you have the money to pay your tuition. If you have any proof of funding or if you receive support from family members or a scholarship, making sure to include that information in your application. If your family members are supporting you, it's important that you include bank statements from your family members for the past 4 months, as well as a letter from your family members confirming that they are financially supporting you. So for many of our international students, parents are the ones that pay for tuition and living expenses. So it's important for them to write a letter confirming that they're your parent and that they will be supporting you financially. In addition to that, you'll also need to include a digital photo, transcripts, and or proof of completion of any prerequisite studies, if applicable. So if your letter of acceptance has a condition on it, you want to show that either you're able to meet those conditions or you've already met those conditions by providing. So for example, if the condition is that you finished your high school requirements, showing that you're in progress to complete your high school diploma. As I mentioned, under client information, if you feel like you need to explain anything, that's where you would attach your explanation letter or any other additional documents you may need. And then once you've uploaded everything, you'll be able to pay your application fee, which is $150. If you haven't done your biometrics yet, you will be required to do your biometrics, and there's an additional fee of $85 for the biometric fees. So once you've applied, if your application gets approved, you will receive a letter in your IRCC account, and within approximately 2 weeks, you should receive your physical study permit in the mail. And so this is, you will see a sample on the screen of what a study permit looks like. And that's what authorizes you to study and stay in Canada. So it's important that you mark the date that your study permit will expire, put a reminder on your phone to make sure that down the line, if you need to extend it, that you're doing it and you're aware of when your study permit expires. Your study permit generally will expire about 3 months before your expected date of completion, or it might expire the date that your passport expires if your passport is expiring before the end of your program. So that's why it's really important to make a note and pay attention to that. The study permit may also include specific conditions as to whether or not you're allowed to work on and or off campus, and other conditions. So it's important to read those and to be aware of what conditions have been imposed on your study permit. So when you receive it, make sure to review it. If you do have any questions, feel free to book an appointment with us and we can go over the conditions with you. If you do need to extend your study permit, you need to study longer, you can apply for an extension of your study permit from within Canada. In addition, as I mentioned, to your study permit, some of you may come from countries that require a temporary resident visa or a TRV to enter Canada, or you might be from a country that requires an ETA. So the TRV usually expires on the same date as your study permit expires, or whatever your current status is in Canada. And so once you apply for your study permit and receive your new study permit, if you need a TRV to travel outside of Canada and to be able to re-enter, you can apply for the TRV after you've received your new study permit. The ETAs are usually issued to citizens of visa exempt countries, and it's required to travel and re-enter Canada. And usually that's valid for up to 5 years. For those of you that need to renew your ETA, you would do that online. A quick note that US citizens and lawful permanent residents of the US do not require TRVs or ETAs to enter Canada. And if you want more information, you can find information on our website under iesc.uw.ca/visas/study-permit_permits.html. For those of you that are maybe transferring from another designated learning institution, so for those of you that are not in high school, maybe you're transferring from Fanshawe or from one of the affiliated colleges, and you currently have a study permit. Before you start your studies at Western, it's important that you do what's called a change of DLI status. So you must notify Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada if you change or transfer to a different DLI in Canada. It's really important that you do this and that you inform IRCC. So to change your DLI number, you will log in to the same portal that you would to apply for a study permit extension. You will need your UCI number, which is found on your study permit, your study permit application number, which can be found in the initial letter you received when you first applied for a study permit approval. And your application number will start with the letter S. You'll also need your new school's DLI number, your new student ID, and your start date at the new school being Western. So to change your DLI number, you will log on to the IRCC website on the IRCC secure account using your GC key. If you don't have an account, you can create a new one. And there will be a button that will say transfer from DLI under the what would you like to do today heading. So you will search for your study permit application by entering your study permit application number and clicking on search for my application. As I mentioned, your application number will begin with the letter S and can be found on your study permit as well. You may be prompted to enter additional details about your original study permit application in order to find your application. Once you've done that, you will enter the following details about your new DLIs. You'll enter the information about Western and then click Submit Transfer. So I've put on the screen Western's DLI number. You'll use your student ID or your student number for Western and the start date of your new program of study. As I mentioned before, your study permit, once you receive it, will have certain conditions on it, and you have responsibilities as an international student at Western. And so it's important that you follow these responsibilities. So the first one is that with your study permit, you should remain enrolled and study at a designated learning institution. So you must hold a valid study permit if you're in a program that's 6 months or longer. This includes those of you that may be in Canada under as a protected person or under refugee status. Students may study without a permit if the program is under 6 months in duration. If you change your post-secondary school, as I mentioned, you must notify IRCC and do a change of DLI status. While you're a student, you must actively pursue your program of study, remaining enrolled and making reasonable and timely progress towards completing your program. So there's no requirement to be a full-time student as far as your study permit is concerned, but there are certain rules if you want to work off campus and to be eligible for your post-graduation work permit. But as far as your study permit is concerned, you just need to remain enrolled and that you are making progress in completing your program. You don't need to notify IRCC or change your study permit if you wish to change your program at the same institution, at the same DLI. And DLIs, just so that you know, are required to report on students' status twice a year. The third responsibility is to make sure that you're complying with the conditions on your study permits. So if your study permit has the condition that authorizes you to work on campus, you can only work on campus if you are enrolled as a full-time student. And the condition that you're allowed to work off campus, you have to be in a program that's at least 6 months or longer, leading to a degree, diploma, or certificate. And again, you must be enrolled as a full-time student. The rules for working off campus during the academic year is a maximum of 20 hours a week off campus, and you cannot begin working until the term starts. So for those of you that are here, you do have to wait until September 1st before you can begin working. Some other useful resources and information. So just a reminder about our international student orientation. The online modules are now available where you can find information about Canadian, Western, and academic culture, your health insurance while you're here in Canada, topics around health and wellness, finding housing, and much more. There's also some topics around your immigration documents. And last but not least, there's information about our international student orientation. And so I hope that you are ready and excited to meet us in person, whether you're moving in early for residence or attending our orientation programming, which will start on August the 26th. And most of our program, our core programming is until September 6th, but we will have continuous events to welcome you and orient you to Western. And this is a great opportunity to meet other students. You will be somewhat experts as you've been here in Canada already, so you'll have lots to share with some of our international students that are coming from abroad. But this is a great opportunity to meet other students, learn about Western, come out and join some different events and learn more about your immigration status here in Canada. If you do have any questions, there's different ways that you can see our team and book an appointment with one of our international student advisors. So you can book an online appointment online through our website. For those of you that are in London, we do have in-person drop-in hours Monday to Friday from 1 to 4. On Friday mornings, we also offer some immigration FAQ sessions where it's a drop-in style on Zoom where you can come in and ask your questions in a group setting. We also offer immigration workshops like today throughout the year. And you can also email us if you do have a quick question. But thank you for today. We'll open it up for some questions from the audience.
Great. Thank you so much, Fabiana. I know I found that helpful. I know for our students, the study permit process can be a bit overwhelming. So breaking it down by step and providing that information that you need is great. I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet, but do feel free to enter those. Okay. I see a question here. It sounds like it's a bit of a personal situation in terms of when their visa is expiring. So I do encourage you to send that question to iesc@uwo.ca, and they can answer the specifics of that extension request that you're mentioning.
The one thing I will mention to that question is just to be clear, if you're asking about the visa, which is the sticker in your passport, or if you're asking about your study permit, which is the paper. And so I always like to clarify which of the two you're asking about, because the answer to the question will differ. And so this is why it's important just to clarify if you're asking about your actual study permit or the visa. But in your case, I would recommend sending us an email with a little bit more detail, and our advisors can look at your particular case so that we advise properly to make sure and determine whether you need to apply for the study permit extension, or if you need to do a change of DLI, or if you need to do anything.
Perfect. We have another question here that says, I have a work permit that only allows me to study in a primary or secondary school. Does this mean I should apply for an extension or a new permit altogether?
A work permit doesn't usually allow you to study. So I'm wondering if you have a study permit that allows you to study at a primary or secondary school. Again, it depends if it's listed as an actual condition. Usually, if you're changing levels of study, you don't need to apply for you don't need to apply for a new study permit, but it depends on where that's written on the study permit. So if it's under the conditions, you may need to apply for a change of conditions or an extension in order to start your studies at Western. So again, I recommend either booking an appointment so that we can take a look at your actual study permit and we can advise you properly.
Great. Another question here, just asking for clarification. Is applying for a work permit different from a study permit?
Yes, applying for a work permit is different and allows you to do different things. And so the work permit allows you to work in Canada. The study permit allows you to study in Canada. There are currently some temporary rules that may allow some work permit holders to start studying with the work permit. However, that won't cover you for your entire degree. So we strongly recommend that even though there's those temporary rules, that you apply for a study permit so that you don't have to worry about that and be caught being out of status because these are just temporary rules. So the recommendation is to apply for that study permit. You can hold the work permit and the study permit at the same time. If I don't get my study permit on time, can I still attend the school? I would have to look at what the temporary rules say just to make sure. So again, I would really recommend either send us an email or book an appointment with us and we can look specifically at that temporary rule as far as being able, if you're able to start studying while you're waiting for the study permit, if you have a valid work permit.
Great. We got another question here. So they're currently in Canada, but they're going to their home country for the summer break. Will the study permit application process take longer than 2 months?
Yes, it can take longer than 2 months. So I believe the current processing time that I saw today was around 65 days, if I'm not mistaken, for study permit extensions. And so it is possible that it might take longer than the 2 months. And you'll also want to look at when does your temporary resident visa expire. And so there's a couple of things there in the middle. But you are encouraged to apply for that study permit application. If you're currently in Canada, apply for that study permit before you go home. You can always include the address of a family member or somebody that you fully trust here in Canada that can receive your study permit and mail it to you back home. But just know that if you are from a country that requires a TRV to come back into Canada, your TRV does also have to be valid to be able to re-enter Canada. So if you're not sure, again, book an appointment with us. I know with immigration, sometimes it is on that case by case, and it is difficult to answer some of these questions in a public forum because there are a lot of nuances right now with immigration and the situation does vary. So booking an appointment or sending us an email can be quite helpful.
Great. So we just had another question come in that says, do I need to have my study permit ready before I accept my offer of admission? The answer is no. You do need to accept your offer of admission before the deadline on your offer. So that can be found both on your offer letter and your Choose portal. You do not need to have your study permit at the time of accepting your offer.
But you do need to have a valid study permit before attending classes.
Some great questions coming in, and our advisors are very helpful. So for all of those case-by-case questions, I do recommend reaching out via email or booking an appointment. Another question, when should I start applying for my study permit?
I would say as soon as possible. So again, depending on what your current status is in Canada and when that expires, but usually the recommendation is to apply as soon as possible unless you currently have a study permit that's valid for more than 6 months. You never want to apply, or generally you don't want to apply more than 6 months before it expires, because you can change what your plans are. And so the general recommendation is about 3 months before it expires. But because it's going to be the summer and some of you may be traveling, the recommendation is to apply as soon as possible to make sure that you have your study permit in time to start your classes in September.
Great. Those are all the questions that have come in so far. If you do still have questions, do feel free to put them in the Q&A. We are going to stick around for a few more minutes to be able to answer any more that you have. And if there is no more questions, I do thank those of you for joining us tonight. I know it's a big process deciding where to go, and getting the information you need about all of those different pieces, such as study permits, is very important. Another question here. If the condition of my study is going to primary or secondary school, do I need to apply for a new study permit, even if it's not expiring in the next 6 months?
So it depends again where that's written on your study permit, and I don't want to give you the wrong advice. And so it's important for you to book an appointment where we can take a look at your study permit just to confirm, because we want to make sure that I don't give you the wrong advice based on what you're currently saying. And so we do need to see your study permit in order to give the appropriate recommendation there.
Great. So I would recommend taking a screenshot of the slide up there for all of those different methods that you can reach out. It sounds like for many of you, it will be helpful to book an appointment or, attend drop-in, send an email. So making sure that you have that contact information. We're also going to be posting a recording of the session today. So if you do want to refer to any of the information, you will have that as a resource as well. Okay. We'll give it another 30 seconds or a minute to see if there's any more last minute questions coming in. All right. Well, thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight. And thank you, Fabiana, for going through all of the specific information our students need to know. If you do have any study permit questions, you know who to reach out to. And if you do have other questions about your offer, your admissions, student life on campus, myself and Tomi, as part of our international recruitment team, are also available to help you. And you can reach us via email at international@uwo.ca. Thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.